All right, thank you so much once again for joining tonight's class. It's been an amazing time so far. I believe we have learned a lot and we keep improving daily. We keep improving daily. That being said, we have a long way to go today. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So we will be looking at the CSS page layout. So we'll go through all the layouts we have in CSS. So CSS page layout techniques allows us to take elements contained in a web page and control where they are positioned relative to the following factors: their default position in normal layout flow, their other elements around them, their parent container, and the main viewpoint or window. Like I said yesterday during the class, the what actually we do in CSS is turning water into wine. What do I mean? We alter the default position of an element, the default styling of an element, the default behavior of an element. We alter it using CSS. So that's basically what we do with CSS. We change, we turn water into wine. We could also turn bread stone into bread. Do man shall not live by bread. So that being said, we use CSS to alter. Mostly, just know that CSS is used to alter the default designs of an element. Simple. So that's basically what you are doing. You get an element that is a block level element, you change it to behave like an inline level element. So that being said, we will look at the normal flow, which is the normal flow. We'll look at display properties. We'll look at flexbox, the grid, floats, positioning, table layout, and lots more. Each technique has its use, advantage and disadvantage. So each of the layouts has its advantage and disadvantage. E- There's an advantage of using Flexbox. There's disadvantage. Each of them has its own niche and has its own limitation. Just take it that way. Has its own niche and its own limitations. No technique is designed to be used in isolation. That means you could use one design one layout techniques to the other. So firstly, let's look at the normal flow. What do we mean by the normal flow? The normal flow is how the browser lays our HTML page by default when you are doing nothing to control the page. So when there is no CSS, you are not altering any behavior. That's the normal flow. You don't alter anything. Block level elements behave like block level elements. Inline level elements behave like inline level elements. Paragraphs, links behave like links. Every element behave their default way without being altered. You are not changing anything, you are not altering anything. That's the normal flow. So by default, browsers will display your code from top to bottom. So we have a sample snippet here, which is we know that this is a block level element. Then we have our list. We have our unordered list with our list of buy cat food, exercise, and all that. Then we have the end. So this is a sample snippet, which following the normal flow, we get our results the way we want. So for many of the elements on your page, the normal flow will create exactly the layout you need. However, for more complex layout, you need to alter the default behavior using some of the tools available to you in CSS. Basically, and what you do, if looking at the design you are being given or the results you want to do, you want to achieve, you alter the behavior of your element to suit that using CSS properties and value. Now we have looked at display. We have looked at display property. The display property where we have the block and inline. So
Inline block.
so we have block inline or inline block. So can change how element behaves in normal flow. So making use of block level elements behave like inline level elements, and inline level elements behave like block level elements, and vice versa. So we have key ones we'll be looking at is your CSS grid and Flexbox. Yesterday we did something on grid. We also had an example on Flexbox, which alters how we change and alter child elements. So alter how our elements behave. So today we'll go more deeper into that for further understanding, and also the question I receive, I'll also answer it during the class. Then we also have another behavior which is float. So applying a float value such as float left, or float right can cause block level elements to wrap along one side of an element. So you can decide to float your element right. Yes, you can float your H1 right and float your image left. It will work, but like I mentioned earlier, we have each element, each layout you use, each CSS layout techniques you use has its own advantage and disadvantage. It has its own niche and its own limitations. So you can use float to float your elements, can float right and float left, and it works just the same way you could use flexibles and justify context space between. One goes to the left, goes to the right, occupies the whole space there. Now, but the question is which one actually gives you what you want and is more suitable? Which one has more advantage? What's the advantage of this to the other? So then we look at position property, which allows you to precise control on the placement of box inside other boxes. Like I mentioned earlier during our first class on CSS, that every element is inside the box. So be using position to position your element where you want it to be. We have static position, which is a default in normal flow, while we have other positions, other positionings. We have fixed, we have sticky and all that. Those are examples of position. Then we have the table layout, which you could, using the property of display, we have, just like we have display inline, display inline, display inline block, display flex, display grid. We also have display table, and it has its own values and properties attached to that. So we also have, so let's dive deeply into each of these display property. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of display properties. We have display inline, display inline block, flex, grid, display table. A default way that elements are set to behave, that's the normal flow. When you talk about the normal flow means you are not altering any default behavior. That's your normal flow. So just like anchor tags, A elements display inline by default. Your span display inline by default. Then your H1 to H6 the behave display block by default. Because it's a block level element. Inline level elements display inline by default because they are inline level elements. My block level elements display block because they are block level elements. So you could change your list to behave like an inline level element, just as we did yesterday on our nav bar when we were working on our project. On the nav bar, we used list, so we had to change the default behavior of the list from block level elements to display inline. So that's what we use, and that's what we do using CSS. Altering designs, altering default behavior of elements to achieve what we want. So the two most important of things, techniques and layouts in CSS in this discussion is grid, display flex, and display grid. These are two most important in layouts, display grid and display flex. I we did yesterday we did an example on flex and grid. Then I made mention of something yesterday about grid, the advantage of grid over to flex and the advantage of using flex. Oh, so that's the same thing. So each of them has an advantage, has their niche and their limitations. So what is Flexbox? So Flexbox is a short name for flexible box layout. Remember, everything is inside a box. So Flexbox is designed to make it easy for us to lay things out in one dimension, either as a row or as a column. To use Flexbox, we use display flex to the parent elements of the elements you want to lay out. All all these direct children now becomes flex items. So basically, we use it on our parent folder. So the folder that houses the children, the just like we did yesterday, if you followed through the class yesterday, the elements we gave our class name, our elements that we were targeting a class name, the parent element, a class name of programs, then which we flexed it. We now gave it a display flex to achieve that all our other divs, other containers that had the children that contain the pictures and the buttons, the picture and the button to display inline no longer as a block level element. So that's what we use. So we flex the parent element. On flexing the parent element, the children element this becomes flex items. That means the they take up flex formats. Okay, so this is a sample snippet of what we have. I'm going to explain this. So the HTML mockup below gives us a containing element with a class of wrapper, inside of which are three div elements. By default, this would display block elements that is below one another in our document. However, if we add display flex to the parent, the three items now arrange themselves into columns. This is due to them becoming flex items and being affected by some initial values that Flexbox says on the flex container. Now, I just explained we have a div here. This is a sample snippet. We have a div here, a div here. This is our div that is wrapped on a parent container and giving it a class of wrapper. Then we now have one, two, and three divs, which are the children. So when we flex the wrapper, by default, divs elements are block level elements. Using flexing it here on our CSS turns these children to behave inline due to the due to due to the fact that it now becomes a flex item. So also they display a row property. So we can also alter the direction using flex direction, like I mentioned in our previous during our previous classes, that CSS has every property has relative properties to it. If you are dealing with backgrounds, there are a lot of background properties that you can also add, which we have practicalized, and we have also seen that. All right, I believe we don't have any question, and I believe we all. If you can hear me, please, and you're following up, drop a favorite emoji so I can know that you're following up with the class. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we will also have a property called flex property, which is a CSS property called flex property, in which this can also be applied in to a flex container. Now we had an example where we flex the previous example here, where we flex this container here has been flexed, has a display of flex. So now we want to add a flex property, what is the behavior of this flex property and what will it do? So in addition to that, we can apply flex property, the flex property to our flex container, so which can change the way the items flex, enabling them to expand and contract according to available space. Now, using flex property, it helps your flex items to expand and contract according to the use of the available space. They use the available space. Is make use of the available space instead of the other way around. Any available space, it makes use of the available space. So that's the behavior of your flex property. Once you add a flex property to a flexed container, all the flex elements, the flex items takes up the available space. They okay, fill up, just like telling them, fill up the gaps, fill up the gaps, fill up the spaces, fill up every empty seat. Just like when they go for an event or a gathering and it said if there is a seat in your front, fill it up, fill up the empty spaces. Now you are filling up the empty spaces because you have been given a flex property to fill up empty spaces. That's it, just like when the moderator comes in, the moderator behaves like the flex property, said, fill up, please, everyone should stand and fill up all empty chairs. So that's the same way your flex property affects the flex item. So as a simple example we have below here, we can add the flex property to all our children, our child element, and give it a value of 1. So now this flex property is being added to the child items. What do I mean by child items? The divs that are inside the flex container, that those divs are, that is where you add the flex property on each of those divs, because you are telling the all the now the container is flexed already. Now you are telling it all the all the participants under that roof to fill up the empty spaces. That's basically what you are doing. The hall is the flex container. That's the container that has display flex. Now the seats there, every seat has been arranged in rows and columns. But you are telling it everybody fill up the spaces, fill up the spaces. So that's basically what you are doing using the flex property. So by doing that, you fill up the, all the spaces that are there, which either your items becomes wider or it becomes narrow, depending on the spaces that you have. So then we go to the next on the list, which is the grid layout. Remember, if we recall, we said our Flexbox is designed for one-dimensional layout. So it's either a row or a column. That's for Flexbox, either a row or a column. While grid layout is designed for 2 dimensions, lining up things in rows and column. Flexbox is one dimensional, either row or column, while grid is 2 dimensional, which is in rows and column. Flexbox, row or column. Grid, rows and column. So similar to Flexbox, we enable grid layouts with each specific display value, which is display grid. Using display grid, with a container and some elements. The once you display, you on the parent container, you add your style of display width. Now, yesterday, purposely we did something where we had display, we wanted to display our grid. We added display grid, but it was not taking up any styling. It wasn't taking up any styling, and I believe either Adula or Doing, I can't remember clearly who helped us, who suggested that we use grid template column to achieve that, which we did, and we achieved what we wanted. Now, so we after adding display grid, we have to define either we are using grid template rows or we are using grid template columns. So we define sorry for that.
Sorry for that.
All right. So sorry, I'm having an echo. I'm trying to remove the echo. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we define three columns. I'm so sorry for that. So we define three columns, each of one FR. You ask what is FR? One fraction. FR stands for fraction. We define as well as two rows, 100 pixels. Now, all this we can use percentage, fraction, pixels, EM, REM, or any other sizing unit to give our spacing. So basically what we are doing, we are defining the space of the cells. So basically this is how to add a grid. This is how to add a grid to our CSS. You have your wrapper, we have display grid, then grid template, columns, fractions. We define three fractions. Then we have three grid template rows. We define 100 pixels, 100 pixels. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. We have 5 different rows. So we have defined that there will be 3 columns and 2 rows. So the 2 rows will be 100 pixels, 100 pixels. Why the columns will take up one fraction, one fraction, one fraction. That means the three rows are going to be, the three columns are going to be equal. Then the rows also going to be equal because they have equal. So if we use two fraction, one fraction, so the column one is going to have more space than the other columns because it's taking up two fractions while others are taking one. So that's basically it is play for that. So placing items on grid, placing your items on grid. So once you have a grid, you can place your items on it rather on relying on auto placement. So it's, you can use the method we used earlier, which is auto placement. Then we have also have another way of doing that by using grid column or grid row to define our our spaces. This causes the item to span multiple tracks. So this is, we have a sample snippet here. We have on box one, we give it a column of 2:4. Remember, which 2:4 means take up two columns. We have take up two columns. Basically, 2/4 means it's half of the entire column that we have. Then with one row, on one row, take up two columns. Then for the box two, we have on grid column one, which means one column, then the row is 1/3, means the three rows divide one section of the three rows is what I want to take up. You are taking, just taking one portion out of the three rows you have. So basically that's just what you are doing. You are taking one portion out of the three. Then 2/4 means you are taking two two portion out of the four portion. So we could try it out for those who have their systems with them. We will try it out, and I believe we are trying it out to see how it's working. So note, we have the two examples reviews just a small sample of the power of grids. Like we did yesterday, we did a more complex grid method. Depending on what you want to achieve, depending on what you want to achieve, it determines how you are going able to do that. Using the grid properties, grid display, and other related properties that comes with grid, you can achieve any layout pattern you want to achieve. So the rest,
Mr. Daniel.
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Please, I don't really understand this grid. Don't know, maybe I wasn't able to stay till the end of yesterday's class, but I don't really get grid.
Okay, I will. Sorry, let me read that. So I'm going to recap on that. Let's say we have a default role that we want to achieve. we, we have a
Sir, please, can you scroll up as you are explaining?
All right, I'm going to do that. So, so we have a. All right, sorry for that. Okay, so I'm going to go through this grid again. Then we do still have to look at work on the examples so that we'll understand better. Yesterday, I think you weren't following up yesterday with the class. I think, Florence, do you have any question before I proceed? So I could trash the two together.
Yeah, it's still on the grid. Probably when you are re-explaining, I will get it. Then, if you did not answer my question, then I'll ask. It's on grid.
Okay. All right. We have the grid. We I believe we all understood the flex box. So flex box does the grid does similar things. Just the same way they are similar, but they have different niche. Now, Flexbox is one dimension, is either column or row. But grid, you are lining up things in rows and column. That means you define the row and column. You can define the role and column of an item. That means you can define how the role should take up. Okay, we need 7 rows and 3 columns. I want this element to cover 3 rows and 5 columns. Now that's great for you. But flex, you can only is one dimensional, meaning you can only style. It takes either a column, flex, you can use flex column or flex row. Flex direction column, flex direction row. That's the only thing you can do with Flexbox. But with grid, with you can style a single element to take up the 2 dimensions. You can say, okay, use 3 columns and 4 rows. Cover 3 columns and 4 rows. That's the 2 dimension thing there. So how do you now add the the number of rows you want an element to cover and the number of columns? That brings us to grid template rows and grid template columns, which gives you an auto arrangement. With that, you are doing adding your grid template rows and grid template column on your parent folder. Once you are doing it on the parent folder, means you are auto arranging everything to take up one fraction. We have 3 columns and 2 rows. So everything we are going to have here, we have 3 columns and 2 rows, meaning this item should be arranged in 3 columns and 2 rows. So one, two, three. Then on the next column, on the next row, we have one, two, three. So that's basically what you just arranged here. One, two, three, column one, two, three, and 2 rows. So I'm telling it 2 rows and 3 columns. So one, two, three for row one. One, two, three means on each row you have 3 columns. That's just the best explanation. On each row, you have 3 columns.
Mr. Daniel,
I
please, I'm
believe
not
that
seeing your
answered your question.
screen.
Then
Hey, I can't even see your screen. I don't know.
you just like we discussed on the flex box, you have your flex property where we can. I explained where you are using your flex property. For you to take up. your for you to take up your rows, like for you to take up the spaces, you use flex property one or so once you're using one or using shrink or using any of the values that comes with the flex property, you can shrink your child element, your child item to use up the space. So the same thing happens here in grid. For grid, you use your grid column and grid row. That's the sample we have here using your grid on the element on the child item. You can style the number of column you want it to use, you want it where you want it to behave, and how you want it using your grid column and grid row, just like what you did using your flex property. So here you are using your grid column and grid row property to do that. So basically, the same thing you use flex property to do. This is the same thing you are doing with your grid column and grid row property. So I believe that question has been answered. I've cleared your doubts on that. All right. So
Good
we'll
evening, sir.
move over to the next thing we have. Okay, Messi, go ahead.
Good evening. Please, I want to make an appeal. While you're explaining this, the reason we are not understanding is because we are not seeing practical examples. So, is there a way you can be showing us maybe a practical work you're doing? Okay, let's say, for example, the project sample we've been working on. If we can practicalize what you're saying using that project, I think we'll understand better.
Of course, I'm going to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So I want you to understand it and have it at the tip of your fingers so that when I'm working on it on the project, you're able to grab it. And most of these things we discussed this yesterday during the class. So you just like doing a revision on what we have done. I'll still take up the question. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. So we move over to flex. Sorry, floats. What are floats? So, like I said, floating elements, left or right. Earlier in this class, I've explained floats. You are floating, just like the way Moses parted the Red Sea, left and right. So that's basically what you are doing. You part the Red Sea, left or right. Altering, basically you are altering the normal flow. So floating an element changes the behavior of that element and the block level element that follows it in normal flow. So the flow element is moved to the left or right and removed from normal flow, and the surrounding context floats around it. Now, when you float an element left or right, the remaining space, it just like float left, float right, the remaining space, any other element that is below, that comes below, we want to squeeze that can size that space, will take up that space immediately. Just like, okay, you shift your chairs to the left hand side of your sitting room, then the other chairs, you move it to the right hand side. Now there's a space within the center. So you can decide to push in your center table to stay on the center and use up the space that is remaining there. So when you float an item left and right, the remaining space, if the item below can size that spacing, it enters there by default. So we have We have the float property has four possible values: left, which flows elements to the left; right, which flows elements to the right; then none specifies no floating at all; then inherit specifies that the value of the float property should be inherited from the element's parent element. Means inherit it from the parent folder. Depending if the parent folder has a float already, it's going to pick it there, else it won't. So we have a sample snippet here, which we have, and we've think I should have a picture here. I don't know why the picture, I think it's network. I don't know why the picture had picture cover ups for this. I don't know why it's not coming up. So I will just take up the whole thing, then we practicalize it. Hopefully I will refresh this whole thing to get the the picture format. So basically we are looking at how to float our element. So on our element, we just use float left. Very simple. Use the float. Float is a property. Using the property of float, you now put in the value. The value as either you want it to float right or float left. That's basically what you are doing. So floats are fully explained. I will do that during. So the next thing we look at float is just floating left or right, moving your items, elements to the right, to the left or to the right. That's basically what you do with float, which depending on what you are trying to achieve determines the property you are to use. So what this class is to bring you to the line to understand how it works and what happens during the whole thing. So we have positioning techniques. Positioning techniques allows you to move an element from where it is or where it would and to be placed by default to another location. So position is not a method of creating a main layout. So you can just position a simple thing. You have visited the site that the the the, the navigation is on the bottom side. Then you have also visited sites that when you are scrolling, the top navigation remains there. It doesn't go in. It doesn't scroll with as you're scrolling. It's just there. Now you achieve those type of things using position, the position property. You use position property to do that. So we have five types of positioning property. We have the static positioning, which is the normal way of your positioning. Just position it is there and how it's supposed to be. Then we have relative positioning, which allows you to modify an element position on a page, moving it relative to its position in normal flow, as well as making it overlap other elements on the page. So using the relative position, it alters the position, makes it to overlap on other elements on the page. So that's the keynote to note from using relative position relative. It alters the element position, making it to overlap other elements in. So if you want an item to overlap, you use relative positioning to do that. Now we are proceeding. Then absolute moves an item completely out of the page, replace normal flow. Like like it's sitting on the like sitting on separate layout. So absolute absolute positioning moves an element completely out of the page normal layout flow. Means sits it on when you use absolute, it takes it sits it on a separate layout. So just like when you use an absolute means, how do I really explain this so that you could grasp the whole concept? So absolute is this. You are giving it a layout. When you use absolute, you just like creating a separate layout from the existing layout. So that's basically what you do. Now, there are some. Have you visited a site where you have a you click on a button for a drop down, the drop down comes out, then you see that the elements goes down, just like you have visited a site where you have your okay. Thank you, Sophia. You've it drops down and the elements below goes down. Then you also have there are some elements where you click on see more, it comes out, then the elements go create a new separate layout. We'll look at all this so that you could understand. Then one of the most used one is fixed positioning. Fixed position is very similar to absolute positioning, except that fixed position fixes an element relative to the browser's view width and not another element. So the thing is this: for absolute, it fixes it relative to an element, while for fixed position, it's to the browser's view width. Now, I mentioned earlier, you have a site, you scroll, but your top navigation does not scroll in. It's just there and it's fixed. There are some sites that you have a button that is just fixed. When you click on it, it takes you to the up. You have the arrow points up. When you are viewing it with your mobile phone, once you click on that button, it takes you to the top, and that button is just there. No matter what you are doing, the button is just there. It's just there looking at you. It's just there. So those buttons are being used fixed positioning to add such buttons. So very similar to that. So this positioning is useful for creating effects such as persistent navigation menu that always stays in the same place on the screen as the rest of the content scroll. Just like you want your mobile, if you want your website to look like on when you're viewing it with your mobile phone, you want it to look as if it's a mobile app. Most of our mobile app navigations are always on the bottom side, just like this Google Meet that we are using now has a bottom navigation. That's where we have our video, our mic, the hand for raising your hands. Then we have a more button and the end call. So those are your navigation. Now you can scroll around this whole thing, but just like if I'm sharing my screen, I could scroll. You can scroll around this page, but nothing affects that behavior. That navigation there is just there. The navigation is just there looking at you and it keeps staying there. So when you use a fixed position, it means it's just there. So you with fix, when you fix an element, your navigation bottom, it stays at the bottom of your site. No matter what you are doing, it's just there. So you can actually, that's where you have, there are some mobile apps. If you visit LinkedIn with your mobile phone, the navigation, just like the way it presents itself on the app, your navigation is sticked there. Regarding the fact that it's despite the fact that it's It's a website. Now it's behaving like a mobile app. Now, how do you achieve that? You use your fixed position to achieve that. So once you fix your position, you tell it you are staying at the middle. It's going to be there no matter what you are doing. You will always find this there. So that's your fixed positioning for you. Then we have another one which is sticky. Sticky position is a new position method that makes an element act like position relative until it hits a defined offset. Now, this is where you have for sticky positioning. Most websites use most website navigation you have experienced sticky, whereby until you scroll to a certain level, you see your navigation comes out. Normally, on when you visit the site, the navigation is you might not actually notice the navigation there, it's just there. Then when you scroll up, you see that it now has a background with some people tends to change the background. When you scroll up, the background of the navigation changes. Then some people when you when you scroll up, you see the navigation. It has a shadow, like a little shadow that you should scroll. You now see you just the navigation is just there. But once you pass a certain height, it relaxes back, becomes transparent. But when you scroll up, once you scroll up to a certain level, it comes out with a background. So you achieve that using your sticky. So that's the difference between your sticky and your fixed position. So your sticky is that you until you reach a certain height, a defined offset before you see that else it's just there. So that's your sticky positioning. So we have a sample here. I think you so this is how to add your position. You add position relative if you are using your relative position. If you are using absolute position, you use position. Now, when making use of position, there are other properties that goes in line with positioning. That goes in line with position properties, which is you have top, left, right, bottom, top, left, right, and bottom. Now, top means you are giving it a specific spacing top. So if you add top 30 pixels means 30 pixels from the edge, fix 30 pixels on the edge. So left, for the left here, you have 30 pixels left. So using you define where you want it. If you are using bottom, 30 pixels bottom, you can use 30, you can define it the way you want it, the spacing you want, the height you want it to be displayed. Just like here, we have this column here is on this is actually fixed. No matter what I do here, it doesn't affect this really. So fixed position removes our element from document flow in the same way as positioning. So just like I explained, the same way you add fix, once you add your position, you add your fix. It, if you add top 30 means you are giving a space, 30 pixel space before the position. So for sticky, the same thing position you use sticky. So for other position values, you use that. So that being said, we will look at I believe we all understood this very well. So we have the table layout. So using the table layout. Now this is styling a table from your CSS. Using we have on your HTML, you have your table tag and all that. So the same way it applies to CSS, you have properties that are dedicated to table styling, where you define the layout of your table and all that. So which you can also turn a you can actually turn an element to behave like a table using those elements to do that. So we have so we could I don't know, network. Can you hear me? Sorry, if you could hear me, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know if my network has disconnected. Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, thank you so much. I can be heard. Can be heard. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I'm trying to make use of our time so that we don't stay over time tonight. So I have an example here for an HTML form where we have, I believe Mr. Manuel took us on this class on forms, HTML forms, where he created a form using field set, legend, and all have you. So you could style your forms to look anyhow you want it, behave anyhow you want it. So CSS, you can always make your form look like a table. I will take us on how to do that. So anything you have on CSS basically, I will still say it again for it to stick, is you are altering the default position of an element, the default behavior of an element. So now since we have a table element, means there's a property that can be used to alter the behavior of a table. And you can always, or there's also a property to use to mimic the behavior of a table. So that being said, bringing us to the display table. Display table, you have a display table caption. These are table related properties and values that you could use to display property, make elements behave like a table and make your table look more palatable to you. So we have here, we have a form, we have a CSS form that we are styling it. I think we should work on this, and we'll have to copy this out and set it up so that we could, or basically I'll send in this to you. You could test it on your own end. So now let me just explain the code. We'll still run through that tonight if time permits. I don't want us to stay over time. So we have our form display table. Then just like the same way we did for grid flexbox, the same way on the child item, that's where you use your table row, display the behavior you want it to display, the way you want it to behave. Here you use display table cell. Then here you use display table row. And just like we have it on the HTML, the way display the way table role and table cell works in HTML, that's the same way you do that. So you can make your an element mimic the behavior of a table. So we have a samples here we could look at. So I've been able to go through this, and we looked at elements, CSS layout elements, and styling properties, where we looked at the normal flow. We have understood what we mean by normal flow. Whenever you hear normal flow, you actually know what it means. We have looked at the flexbox. We also looked at the grid and the related properties to grid. Then we also looked at the we also looked at the grid, what is there on grid. We also looked at positioning, how what we mean by positioning, and different types of positioning, which we have your static position, your fixed position, your sticky position, and we also look at your table, display table, and every other ones. So I believe we all understood that. So let's take some examples from here, and let's take some samples from here. Yes, let me my screen. I have to share the other screen. Share my entire screen. Sorry. Sorry.
Please, can you all hear me? Am I the only one not hearing Mr. Daniel?
I can hear you. I can't hear Mr. Daniel again, unfortunately.
Okay.
I am sorry for that. I was trying to pick up. So I believe we don't have any question. Do anyone have any question? Okay. So now I'm trying to come up with my VS Code. I think I have to just run a sample from here. So we discussed on Flex yesterday using our project and we worked on that. Um, we also saw the display of Flex. Let me see. Sorry. Uh, hold on. I need to. I don't know why this is not coming up. What's happening? So we actually looked at this. Let me launch my live server. So practicalize what we have done here. Let's increase this. I believe you could see my screen very well. So from the work we have yesterday, we used flex, display flex here. Made use of display flex here on our CSS. We I'm going to recap on the code on our navigation bar, which is the parent folder that is housing our two child items that we want to flex. So we this gave this is our flex container, which we gave to which we started to display flex, and we now used a property of justify between to justify it between, which I could uh do something so that we could, let's say, so we could practicalize what we learned today. We said flex direction. So we have flex direction, flex wrap, flex group, flex string, flex basic, and flex flow. I'm not going to run through all of this. You are meant to do that on your own. Check it out more. My work is to make you bring you to the light on which ones we have. So flex direction. If I use flex direction, column. If I use column, flex direction column, what happens is this. I have altered this, the display of this. This is now in column. Think you won't really get the display since my screen is slow than my voice. So let's alter it from this other side so that we can see the work of this. We let's use flex direction. So I'm using flex direction column. Now, despite the fact that this is display flex, but the flex direction, I gave it a flex direction of column. I gave it a flex direction of column. Now, if I give it a flex direction of row, I'm actually giving a direction which it has taken up row. So by default, flex is when you use flex, you're actually doing flex row. So, but you could now use flex direction to give the direction. Then we also talked about the we talked about the flex property, and we say we add the flex property to the child item. So on the child item, which is our UL here, we have so our UL has the class navigation. So for the L1, we could use the L1, we could use here we add flex the flex item of one, or we could use pixels or any type of to do that, which is taking up the string positions here. So this is how to add it. So knowing fully well, this is our parent folder, and on the child item, that is where you add the flex property for that. So for the we'll add this our navigation. This our navigation is the top navigation. So we could add position of add a position of sticky. Now we are using a position sticky. Sticky position. I see. I see. I see. So this navigation. Sorry. Okay. This is where we have position absolute. What happens when we use position absolute? So we have an absolute behavior. It overlaps other element. Yes. Yes. It overlaps other elements. Then if we use relative, it's taking the relative part. Then let's use fixed. We are using fixed. It's just a fixed and overlaying on top each item here because we are using fixed, making use of fixed. So we just on a fixed position. Then if we use sticky, so we need to add so for sticky, sorry for the network, you stop, use 0, giving it a value of the position where you want is to stick. So position, am I ready here? Let's see which, okay. This is header, header, header. So yes, add header here and class. So we have our sticky here with this adds a background of of black. Oh, sorry. Now we now have our sticky with background color of black. So our site is moving to our ministry is moving to permanent sites. So we have so let's add a fix. Okay, we have done a fixed positioning. We have also practiced different positioning, absolute and relative position. We have also asked. So okay, let's work on floats. So let's we have 1 and 2, item 1 and 2. Let's float item 1 and 2, which is here. We have that on the have that on the get our match. We have this. So let's give the class. Let's give this a class name, a class of F. Let's give it say caption and class name of what. So on our CSS, we use here. I'll go down to this part, and here I could do that. Here I'll use dot cap float float left and dot. Now you see, I float left. I mentioned something earlier when we discussed during the time we discussed about the float. That once I float an item, any other item that is below and it can size the remaining space, it will automatically take up the remaining space by default. So I'm going to, I've not floated the other one. I only applied float to one of it, which is this caption of get match. What happened? It now, because I float this thing left, there's now space from here to this point. So because this could size here, it took up this position here. So when I what float right, float right. Now I just floated right. Now there is a space here, and the items below could size that space. That's why you have this image here. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the down columns are now there. So if I remove this flex, you will see that it was on the down column. Now, it justifies what I explained during the whole class when I said if you float an item, the item coming that is directly under fills up the opening space that is there. Just like immediately I did this, I floated the right, then the items below had to fill up the gap that has been created. So that being said, that's the pattern for floats. Then we move over to our grid. Move over to the grid. So I'm going to hide that. Okay, I think I pulled out. So this we have. Oh, I think. Oh, okay, okay. Let's add a bit. So we have a class of mesh. So copy this comes our CSS and dot mesh. I have display grid and grid template column. I have one arrow. Then we have our stage. So we have our state up here. Let's try. It's there. We give this back.
Yeah, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel.
Yes, Lucy.
Okay, I don't know whether if you are talking, because we can't hear you. That's fine.
All right, I wasn't really talking. So I created a so this is on our merge layout, which has display grid on our CSS. So let me just divide two. Place the ball. Do it this way. It is this. So this is our merge, which has a style of display grid, and we have our display templates. Now, during the explanation, I explained that when you are using this, it alters this auto layout placement here. So now, with what I did here, we have that this I said use column 2 over 4 and row 1 over 2. Now, if you see that this is taking 1 over 3, this is taking 1 over 3 of the row, then 2 over 4 of the column. See that these items now, there's this space here, okay? Let's, uh, I believe you could see that now. This is column 1, this is column 2. So let's inspect. This is box 1. We said box 1 to take 2 over 4 of the column. That's 2 over 4 of the column with 1 over 3 of the row. So this is box 2. Box 2 is here. This is box 3. We so with this we could give our styles to so I believe you have seen the display. You could play around with this. We have overstepped the time. Then the next thing we looked at was the grid has a lot of properties you could check out. We have property column end, column start, row end, row start. So column end, you could use. We also have auto grid flow, grid auto columns, grid auto rows. You could check this out and know how the displays work. And in, I would have said enjoy yourself. So the next thing we looked at was the Flexbox. I just want to show example of the Flexbox. We have actually make use of this Flexbox. Here, where we use it to style our navigation bar. Then we use positions to make our navigation bar to be sticky. We use sticky positions to make it to be fixed on the top. Then we use flex here to arrange our file here. Then on this other part, we had to float left. Then here we use grid to arrange our components that we have here. Let's arrange it properly again. Let's remove this and everything goes back to normal. Our grid is ready. Then we also looked at different positioning, relative, absolute, sticky, static, and all that. We also had to implement, what else did we implement here tonight? It floats, and we saw how the float works. The left, when you float an item, the items, the elements that are under fills up the remaining space that is for float for you. So I believe we have touched all that we scheduled to do tonight. I don't know if you have any questions before we could draw the curtain. Thank you so much, Adola. Thank you so much, Choma. Thank you so much. So, in the absence of questions, we will draw the